I want to share something amazing. So, hello, Pussy Portal ladies. This is a video overdue. I had no bandwidth last week. We were leading up to the Eden World Reimagine event, and I was unable to connect and shoot this video for you. So, here I am with the sniffles, tired, exhausted, on purpose. Had a great event, but I want to share something very fascinating with you. So it's a little story, so bear with me. It might be a slightly long video. Excuse my sniffles. I have super allergies today, and I think I'm just super run down. So this pine cone that I was just showing you, my nephew gave me this pine cone 4 summers ago or 3 summers ago. He found it on the way up from Florida on their drive up to camp in upstate New York, and he gifted me 2 pine cones. And like a month or 2 ago, I had 2 and I didn't know what to do with them. We were resetting and clearing things out, and I was like, all right, I'll bring one of these pine cones, this pine cone that's looked exactly like this for almost 4 years now, and I will make a little altar by my tree. This is my tree. I've shown you my tree a bunch, and I will put one of these pine cones by the tree. This is not a pine tree. This is a black willow tree. Nearest pine tree is like down, like probably like, I don't know, quarter mile, or I don't know, whatever. Not nearby. No, that doesn't have pine cones like this. Pine trees nearby. And so I set the pine cone by the tree, and it was part of my altar for weeks. And then one day, I came out to discover that the pine cone that I had put there looked very different. And I can put a picture below. And it was all smooth and closed and pointy. And I thought, oh, interesting. My first thought was like, maybe the pine cone got tousled around by the wind and all these little pieces knocked off. And at the center, that's what a pine cone looks like. And I was like, oh, okay, the pine cone must have morphed somehow or something. I was like, okay, so I put the pine cone back next to the tree. It was tousled over there by the wind. And then a couple days later, I came out and this pine cone was back. And I was like, what the heck? What? Like, wait a second. Good, glitch in the matrix. Where did my pine cone go? And how did that pine cone get back? So I went to my husband and said, do you remember me telling you about how I thought it was weird that my pine cone might have gotten rolled around and looked like this other pine cone? Or was I dreaming that? And he was like, I kind of remember, maybe you're dreaming. I'm like, okay, now I'm really going crazy. I don't know if I dreamed it or not, but all I know is that the pine cone that I put there is now back to the pine cone that I put there, and the other pine cone's nowhere to be found. And I walked around, looked to see, did anything blow away, did anything blow in? Is there a pine cone tree around anywhere that could have maybe blown in a different pine cone? If you know anything about pine cones, you're laughing by now. If you don't know anything about pine cones, keep watching either way. So I was like, okay, I'm going crazy or somebody's fucking with me. I even asked, I was like, Rano, are you fucking with me? Did you move the pine cone? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, all right, I believe you. So a week or so goes by. I come back out to my tree one day. I'm like, oh my God, where the hell is this pine cone? And the other pine cone's back. So I took a picture. I'm like, this is weird. I'm totally tripping out. I walked around. There's no sign of this pine cone. This other pine cone's in its place. I'm like, I am either traversing worlds, which I am as a pussy the portal priestess, amongst other things, or I don't know what's happening, but this pine cone is now gone again, and this other pine cone has shown up. So I took the picture, sent it to Rano. He's like, what? You're kidding me. That night, I tell my friends, I'm like, I have a pine cone mystery on my hands. Help me if you solve it. I don't know what's happening. And they're like, that's weird. Like, how could maybe it's the same pine cone? I'm like, it looks, and I showed them the picture, and they're like, no. And my friend from the East Coast, he's like, that doesn't happen with pine cones. I don't know. But my one friend was onto it, but I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, you should mark it. So next day I come back out. I'm like, all right, I'm going to mark that pine cone just so I know, like, is it the same pine cone? What's happening? So I marked the pine cone with some pink marker, pink Sharpie. I was like, that's pretty obvious. Pink Sharpie on a natural pine cone. And I leave it back. A couple days later, I come out and I was like, oh, the new pine cone's there and the old pine cone's gone. Oh no, sorry, vice versa. I marked the newer one, and I came back out, and the pine cone was there with the pink marks on it, looking like this. Very clearly, I marked it in several spots just to make sure. There it was. And I was like, oh my God. And Rana was with me. He's like, do pine cones close and open? I was like, well, I'm going to find out. So, of course, I should have thought to Google this in the first place, but I didn't. Looking into the mystery. So I Googled it. Sure enough, and this is the amazing thing here. Sure enough, this thing, which had been sitting in my love shack for almost 4 years, completely separate from its mother, picked up as if it was dead. This seed of that tree, once I brought it back out into nature, started doing exactly what it does in nature. The experiment, you do an experiment with pine cones, you can put these in water and watch them close up. So they react to humidity and temperature and act accordingly. So that is a miraculous thing, that this is not attached to any roots. This is, if you pick a flower, it dies. But this essentially, I believe, is the seed from the flower of the tree. And even though it's been sitting dormant in my home here on the lake for almost 4 years, and I have another one I'll bring out, it started to do its thing again. In nature, once it was back in nature, it opened and it closed according to the temperature and the drying and the humidity. When it's dry, it opens, and when it's moist, it closes. When it's dry and cold, it opens. When it's moist and warm, I think it closes. Or I can't remember. I have to look it up again. But that's fascinating. That this thing is a living, breathing somewhat. I mean, it is reading the bioenergetics of the ground, of the tree, the mother tree, or whatever. I got to do more research on pine cones, and opening and closing according to what it's sensing. So it's a pretty amazing thing that I just learned, how magical pine cones are, and I can't help but relate it to the sensing piece that I've been sharing with you around the tree and our nervous system and our pussies, and how much opening and closing and resonant field that we are reading at all times, and our ability to be in communion with nature, that this pine cone, completely separate, you think it's dead, like a branch falls off and that's it, like it dries up and dies. But this is still doing what it does. I'm in awe. And look at this beautiful pattern. I mean, like sacred geometry at its finest. Like, talk about le fleur de lis, the flower of life. I mean, look at that. So that's the story of this moment. Thanks for letting me share. Thanks for bearing with me. And I would love to hear, what metaphors are you getting? And if you did know about pine cones, you're laughing with me, of course. How was this video for you?